Yes, hello. I remember the moment my daughter was out of nappy for the first time. I cheered, I hurried. Not because I was proud of my daughter, but because it was actually liberating not to have to clean up her poo. And then a few years ago, the day I changed my father's nappy for the first time, I burst into tears. I am not sure it was out of pity for my dad, who used to be strict and neat, or it was out of fear of the extreme caregiving labor that awaited me. Maybe it was a bit of both, but I remember the long ago version of myself singing hooray. But changing nappy was not my work, it was my mom's work, my mom who was suffering cancer, and I had a dual work of caring for my mom who was suffering cancer and my dad. Toileting is one of those things that looks like caring. If you are doing it for yourself, it's self-care, which is natural. If parents do it, it's parenting, which you should be happy about. And if sons and daughters do it, it's care for the elderly, which is sad. But after all, it's the same labor. Care is something we all need to do at some point in our lives, but the quantity and quality of care is not equitable for everyone. So today I want to talk about a fair care society. According to the National Survey of the Elderly in Korea, nearly 90% of the elderly are cared for by their family members. No matter how well a society has a long-term care system or services, the primary source of care comes from close family members and close relationship. We shouldn't forget this. The country can take care of this. The society can take care of this. Well, it's not the reality. We call this informal caregiving. And interestingly, the gender distribution of informal caregivers varies between societies. In Korea, more than 70% of informal caregivers, such as family members and relatives, are women. There are countries where the gender ratio is 50-50, but in countries with a strong family culture such as Korea, the proportion of women is higher. In my research, I noticed something unusual, and I see Korean men here are quite nervous. And Korean men are particularly dependent on their spouses for care. It seemed like it was difficult to find a carer other than a spouse. Compared to other countries, Korean men are much more likely to rely on their spouses for care and much less likely to rely on their children or other official caregivers for care. And they couldn't really get care if they didn't have a spouse. Is it that they don't want to be cared for by someone other than their spouse? Or is it that it's not easy to find someone other than the family members? So we looked into this. So public care, such as home visits by caregivers, is also less likely for men than for women. Well, is this because Korean male elders feel negative and ashamed of their dependency, or because they are reluctant to rely on other heterosexual carers? Well, I don't want to really point out well, this is because men's characteristics or men are somewhat to blame. It's structural issue, and this results in caregiving inequalities for both men and women. From the perspective of the care recipient, a care deficit occurs when the wife is absent or unavailable to provide care, and also the caregiving woman has a sole care burden. And older women carers are often in poor health conditions themselves and sometimes suffer from depression because of their unavoidable caregiving responsibilities, and they are overwhelmed by the natural slavery, so to say, of caring for their children, parents, or in-laws, spouses, and grandchildren. And Attorney Kim talked about 40 years ago, and I would like to talk about 600 years ago. In Korea, there was a practice called 고려장, which is an ancient burial practice where a dying elderly is left to die in an open tomb. So a child carries a parent into a mountain and then leaves the dying parent there. It's because they were in an economic hardship and they couldn't really support their parents any longer. But mother left in the mountain could see other older people there, but found that she's still younger and healthier compared to other people in the mountain. But she was left there, so she picked up a stone and then she started to break her teeth because she wanted to look older, because she didn't want her son to be blamed for leaving her at a relatively younger age. So this was 600 years ago, but this culture still remains because older Korean women are burdened with dual and triple care work, and they need to take care of many people at the same time or take care of many people in a row. So they need to apply for different health services, and they need to take care of themselves and others, and their spectrum of work is very diverse. And this dual and triple work is not just left to older women, but also women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s as well. So there's a lot of structural burden on Korean women. In May in Korea is called the Family Month. So some organizations or regions have a filial piety awards ceremony. So the press release showed a woman receiving an award for her double and triple care of her parents-in-law, husband, and disabled brother-in-law. And it was heartbreaking. Recognizing and rewarding dutiful daughters-in-law with awards are not really helpful. Our society should not so easily recognize such situations, but rather provide more active and stronger policy support to prevent double and triple care burdens. Our research showed that countries with a greater reliance on women in the family to provide care had high prevalence rate of depression among women providing care than other countries. So women who provided more care had lower levels of social participation. So countries that take it for granted that informal caring roles are imposed on women and think it's natural will need to redesign their care strategy. These cultural and institutional systems are negative for women, but for men too. Men will inevitably suffer from lack of care if they have no one to care for them, and women will inevitably suffer from depression because of the burden of care. And the tragedy of men will become the tragedy of women. And so far I've talked about informal caregiving. Now I will move on to formal caregiving. And this responsibility and burden of caregiving should be shared between gender. And I am a nurse. I have been a nurse, and most of my students work as nurses in hospitals, nursing homes, and health centers. And nurses struggle in care settings because there are too many patients, and they often give up on nursing and quit their jobs. And the turnover rate is 44%. So hospitals are short of nurses. So they recruit a lot of nurses every year, but they treat nurses badly. So nurses quit easily and go to other hospitals where nurses are treated better. So many nurses call themselves tissue workers. So tissues are like one of use. And caregivers who support the elderly often describe themselves as they're kept in the closet, because there are 2.5 million certified caregivers, but only 20% are active because most of their certifications are left in the cabinet. So most of them suffer from job insecurity, prejudice against the profession, poor working conditions, inadequate pay, unclear tasks, heavy workload, and low social recognition. There is a high turnover rate, and the sector faces a recruitment shortage. And there are also people who are more vulnerable, carers for the sick. They are even worse off because there are no accurate statistics on how many are working in our society, no workforce management, no recruitment standards, no professional training. Most of them are foreigners, and the current working conditions are exploitative for foreign workers. And more than 80% of typical public care workers, such as nurses, caregivers for the elderly, and care aides for the sick, are women. This is skewed by social structures and cultural expectations. And the value of care work should be reassessed and revisited. Care work is essential labor, and we need to ensure fair wage and working conditions for care workers and increase job security. A gender-neutral culture of care must be established to recognize that care work is not exclusively a female role. Policy support is needed to ensure that care work is distributed fairly regardless of gender. And regardless of gender, young or old, we will need to create a sustainable care system. Caring is an essential virtue that underpins our society. We will not be able to create a society that is sustainable unless we recognize the value of care. So we will need to respect care workers, and it is high time. Thank you.